Psalm 23, a psalm by David. Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall lack nothing. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and loving kindness shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in Yahweh's house forever.
So one of the goals of this video is to consider 3 other ancient Near Eastern texts that reflect some of the same themes and motifs as Psalm 23. We'll look at the similarities between the hymn of Shamash, the sun god of Mesopotamia, and we'll take a look at the Canaanite text of Anat's War in the Valley, which is in stark contrast to Psalms 23. And then we'll check out the symbolism of the ritual where it mentions setting a table or the ritual meal by looking at the text of Adapa and the food of life. So Shamash, the sun god, the god of justice of Babylonia and Assyria, had a lot of the same roles as Baal of the Canaanites and Yahweh did. Here is a deity that you could not hide from. He knew all, and he visited the earth, and he watched over the earth, and he was the god of justice. And the hymn to Shamash is very beautiful, and it reminds us not only the hymn of shepherding, as in Psalms 23, but also the hymn praising Yahweh as Lord of the earth in Psalm 8. So here's the hymn of Shamash. In the brilliance of thy light their path is obscured. Constantly look at thy radiance. The 4 world regions like fire. Opened wide is the gate, which entirely the bread offerings of all the Igigi, O Shamash, at thy rising are bowed down, O Shamash. O Shining One, who opens the darkness, who intensifies the noonday heat, the grain fields, the mighty mountains are covered with thy brightness. Thy brilliance fills the extent of the land. When thou art risen over the mountains, thou dost scan the earth. Thou art holding the ends of the earth, suspended from the midst of heaven. The people of the world, all of them, thou dost watch over. Whatever the Counselor King, has willed to create, thou art regarding altogether. Those endowed with life, thou likeness dost tend. Thou indeed art their shepherd, both above and below. Faithfully thou dost continue to pass through the heavens. The broad earth thou dost visit daily. So here we have the idea of Shamash being under who was the creator god of Mesopotamia, and he watches over the earth. The Igigi are the council of the gods. They perform certain kind of like helper deities. So here also Shamash can possibly be compared to Ra, who passes over the earth daily and then travels through the underworld. So if you take this hymn compare it to Psalms 23 and Psalm 8, you have a pretty good comparison to look at. Here the shepherd theme is mentioned, and here Shamash is the caretaker of both the earth and the mortals. The gates of Anat's house were shut, and the lads met the lady of the mountain. And then Anat went to the valley. She fought between the two cities. She killed the people of the coast. She annihilated the men of the east. Heads rolled under her like balls. Hands flew over her like locusts. The warriors' hands were like swarms of grasshoppers. She fastened the heads to her back. She tied the hands to her belt. She plunged knee-deep into the soldier's blood, up to her thighs in the warrior's gore. With a staff she drove off her enemies, with the string of her bow her opponents. So, as we heard from the text, here Anat, later on, is not appeased by her killing of the other deities who came against Baal. So she goes to her house, and the text goes on to say that she makes the tables into warriors and the chairs into warriors, and she continues to kill and be drenched in blood. Then she laughs, and once she's appeased, she puts everything back into its place. She washes her hands and is kind of, so to speak, cleansing herself from what she had just done. Not that she's guilty about it in any way. So, hearing and reading the text of Anat and the mayhem in the valley, it's possible that Psalms 23 may be written in retaliation to the text of Anat in the valley. And the phrase, you set a table before me in full view of my enemies, meaning that in the midst of chaos, the idea of sitting down and eating, which is something that you do during a time of peace, not a time of war, but in full view of your enemies, and they can't do anything about it, is pretty amazing. So here we have a text that is totally opposite of Psalms 23, and it is full of violence and chaos. So, looking now to the story of Adapa and the Food of Life, he was sailing, so the story goes, the wind comes, and I'm not sure if it destroys his boat, knocks his sail off. He becomes infuriated, rips the wind in half, and the gods are really upset with him. So he goes home, and the gods bid him to come and eat. And his father, who is afraid, tells him not to eat the food of the gods, because they may try to kill him. So he goes to heaven. They give him a robe. They anoint his head with oil, and they set him down, and they place before him the food of eternal life, or the food of immortality. And he remembers what his fathers said, and he doesn't drink, he doesn't eat, and the response from the deities. They say, "Come, Adapa, why hast thou not eaten and not drank? Now thou shalt not live." So he's very disappointed and is very distraught by what has happened, and he loses, like in the Garden of Eden, he loses his chance at partaking of the food of life, which is pretty interesting. So Adapa is offered food and drink, and then oil, and this is seen as symbolic of the ritual meal in the text. And such things we see done in the ancient Near East. So we find the same motifs from Psalms 23 as we do here in Adapa, setting the table, anointing the head with oil, and it's pretty neat how the same motifs were used across many cultures, and they mean almost the same thing and have the same context.